Okay, I think we have everyone here and I want to kick off. Hello, and welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I am Divya Kakkad. I'm the VP of Marketing at Graham & Walker. If this is the first time you are joining us, Graham & Walker is a venture firm that activates the potential of women in business through programming, community, and direct investments. We're on a mission to reshape the NASDAQ by investing in tech companies founded and led by women. Every time I say that, I get goosebumps, but here we are, we are doing it. And part of that programming includes sessions like today, where we bring in real folks like Mac, who are doing incredible work in the startup ecosystem, either as a founder or an investor. And so the rest of us can be inspired in our own lives. Mac Conwell is the founder and managing director of RareBreed Ventures. He started his career as a software engineer for the US Department of Defense and is a two-time founder with one successful exit. He also spent many years as an investor at TEDCO, the investment arm for Maryland, where he worked on the seed investment fund. He then went on to start his own fund, what we know today as RareBreed Ventures, a pre-seed fund that is investing in exceptional founders outside of the large tech ecosystems earlier than everyone else. So with that, join me in welcoming the one and only Mac Conwell.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we've been so excited for this conversation. I know you've been, you've been traveling and you were in London, and I know I feel like every day I learn that you are speaking at some forum or, with some community. So I'm so thankful that we could find the time to make this happen.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. I love this kind of work.
Awesome. So Mac, let's start at the very beginning. What was your path to becoming an investor? And tell us the story behind RareBreed.
Yeah, so my path to becoming an investor is a little different. Really, the idea of becoming an investor was something where, as a founder, whenever you start to pitch to investors or raise capital, we all have this kind of sense of it doesn't seem too hard. I could do this. I know a bunch of founders. I could probably pick somebody and write checks. I could do that. I was no different, right? I was the same thing, thought the same way, but I didn't have any real way in. And so after my second company didn't work out, I was working at a marketing firm. And after being at that firm for a year, they got a client I didn't agree with ethically. And so I quit. I quit on a Friday on principle, just told them I couldn't be there. And then the very next Monday, I got this community-wide email from the investment arm of the state of Maryland saying they were hiring. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess this might be my chance. And so I literally applied off of that email. It had no clue what I was doing or, how I was supposed to make this happen. And, they gave me a shot. So that's how I break in the venture off of an email. So I don't know if I would suggest that to anybody else. And then when I started working for the investment arm of the state of Maryland, they were struggling to invest very specifically in the Black-led startups. And so they were trying to come up with a solution. And so less than 5 months on the job, came up with a proposal for a pre-seed fund. And I was like, hey, we do investing really well, so we should keep doing that. So if we want to get more, entrepreneurs of color in, they keep complaining about lack of access to friends and family capital. Let's institutionalize that. Let's create a pre-seed fund and be the first check writers. And by the way, I got a Black-owned bank in Baltimore to put up half the money for us. I got into a bunch of trouble because I did the deal with the bank before I showed my bosses the proposal, because apparently I wasn't allowed to do deals on behalf of the state of Maryland. Go figure. But then they told me it was okay and they let me go run that. And so I ended up running what is now known as the Builder Fund here in the state of Maryland. After 3 years of running that, my team and I went before the governor and state legislators and got them to put $1 million in the annual budget to make it a long-term fund here in the state. It is the first and only state-backed pre-seed fund for women and minorities in the country. And we put a playbook around that, and hopefully we'll see more of those eventually. But through that experience, here I am starting a fund, the pre-seed fund, for originally Black founders and then underrepresented founders as a whole. And I was still meeting incredible founders I couldn't support, right? And so that's really where the idea of RareBreed starts to come into focus. And it really was one founder in particular who had an idea that I really, really wanted to invest in, and my team wouldn't let me do it. And there was this woman who wanted to build a tumble dryer that could dry a wig or hair extension in 15 minutes with no heat. Super incredible idea. Um, she had it all worked out, but nobody would pay attention to her. Nobody would listen to her. So the only way she could think of getting access to capital after getting no's for nothing but 3 years was she became a surrogate mother. This woman gave birth to twins for a small amount of money just for the opportunity to start building a prototype. And I was sickened. And I recognized that, like, if I was ever going to truly do the work I said I wanted to do and back founders like her, I'd have to do it on my own terms and have to start my own. So that's where the idea of RareBreed comes from. And then in September of 2020, I quit my job to really go do it.
Wow. I mean, I've read the story, and I know of the founder that you're talking about. It's incredible. Incredible that you I mean, it's a very inspiring story, but also incredible that you had, what it takes. Like, you used that as motivation and went and actually raised the fund. Not many people can say that. So I hope you're really proud of that.
Proud enough.
So tell me, what actually makes you feel that these founders are going to be successful? Like, what is the belief that rare breed founders are going to be successful?
Well, part of our thesis is is being really interested in the way founders think about customer acquisition, right? So I think our founders are going to be successful because at the core of many of the companies we invest in, they have a very unique or distinct idea of how they go about getting their customers, right? Like, they know they're solving a real problem, right? And they figured out that when customers use their problem, customers are happy. But like, how do you increase that amount? How do you increase that number of customers? That's really where a lot of it comes from. And then on the other side, you have founders like this woman where it's just, sometimes you just meet incredible people you have to back, right? It's not an everyday or common thing. But there are times where I meet a founder that's so unique or so smart or has such a different perspective that I truly believe that they're going to be the smartest person in every room they walk into. And when you back smart people, it's not so much about the product or the problem they're solving, it's that they're smart enough that if things need to change, if they need to pivot, if they need to move in a different direction, they are going to be bold and make those decisions and move in that direction, right? Like, I can't run the business for you. I can be here to support you. So I'm going to support the folks who can be very nimble. And that's something that we saw during COVID, right? Especially early on, those founders who were very nimble in their approach were able to make pivots, able to make changes, while those who were very rigid in their approach, a lot of those companies started to struggle, right? So I think that's really what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there, right? It's about the founder and not as much as the product. You're really backing the person because they may go on and build other things. It's not just that one thing. So where do you source these founders? Like, where does your deal flow come from?
Everywhere. I look everywhere. So like at one point, so like when I broke in the venture, my original job was to find the best early stage companies in the state of Maryland. And then it became the best early stage companies in the state of Maryland ran by underrepresented individuals, right? And so you have to get really creative to find the best companies, and you have to have a really broad reach. Well, that's just the way I approach it. That's the way I approach venture now. I look everywhere. A story that sticks out to me, back when I was running the pre-seed fund, I'll never forget this. At one point, I would go to like all these events, like almost every day I was at an event speaking or trying to meet founders. And one day I show up to the Lesbians Who Tech meetup group, the local chapter. I was the first guy to ever show up to one of their meetings. Everybody looked at me like I had two heads when I showed up. And when they said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, I'm looking for early stage tech founders. And Lesbians with Tech, I figured, I might find a tech founder here." So I came to see if I could meet some entrepreneurs. And they were so taken aback. And I have to admit, like, it was one of the scariest moments and most uncomfortable moments for me, right? Like, I didn't know what to say or do. I didn't know how they were going to react to me being there. And it was great. I got to go there many times. I've developed relationships with some folks and I've met some founders through there. But it was crazy to me because the next day when I came to work, my bosses questioned me about going to that event and why did I go? And I'm like, well, our job is to find tech founders. It says who tech, like tech's in the name. Like I went to go see if there were some entrepreneurs there. And like, it was weird to me that everybody thought that was a crazy thing to do. And so for me, that's just the way I approach deal sourcing. I look everywhere. I take cold DMs, cold emails, I LinkedIn, I speak at different forums like this several times a week. Like I try to meet founders as many places as I can and making sure that I'm not only going to the same places all the time. Like, yeah, it's great that I can speak at Techstars or talk to some YC founders or 500 founders, but like the ecosystem's a lot bigger than that, right? And so making sure I'm taking the time to go broader is really important. So yeah, for me, deal sourcing goes everywhere. But that's also like a downside to it is I get so many people reach out to me. I only get back to like a small percentage of them, right? Like of all the founders that reach out to me, I don't get to all of them, right? I don't get the most of them, to be honest. But I try to do what I can where I can.
This is actually leads perfectly into my next question, which is how can a founder like stand out to you? Like what is it that you're looking for, especially if they're cold emailing you, or like what would make them stand out?
Traction and growth rate, like that. Like at the end of the day, the biggest indicator towards having a successful, when we say successful, that's really a startup that can get to an exit or get acquired. The biggest thing that shows the trend that we see is early traction or early growth rate, right? How fast are you growing? And if you can show me a company is growing fast, I'm going to take that call every time. Now, the way you do that in the cold email is you give me 2 to 3 sentences about what you do, and then you give me 2 to 3 major KPIs. And so that could be how fast you're growing. That could be how many users you have. That could be the size of your sign-up list. That could be that you just closed a deal with a major partner or customer. Whatever it is that you think is impressive, that shows traction of growth, well, then that's going to get me excited every time, right? That's the easiest way to stick out. Beyond that, if you have a video or a demo, those things help too, right? Like if I could visualize and see what it is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are the things that make a company stick out, especially if you're cold emailing, right?
And just so we get a sense of like how, this is different for different VCs, but for RareBreed, how many deals do you see? How many deals do you see per year? How many do you invest in? Like, what does that funnel look like?
Yeah, so we'll see, I guess, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,500 to 4,500 deals a year.
Wow.
We'll invest in, so last year we saw a little more than 4,500 deals and we made 32 investments.
32.
Right? Yeah. And granted, 32 is still a lot. Right?
Seeing 3,500 is a lot.
Yeah. And then again, seeing 4,500 deals is a lot too. So we did 32 deals last year. So we see a lot. And so that, for context, like in any given month, I'm gonna see 300 to 400 companies. I'm gonna interact, that there's gonna be some kind of touch point. Of those, we'll take a meeting with maybe 60. Of those 60, we'll take a second meeting with maybe 20. And of those 20, we'll invest in 0 to 2 or 3 every month, right? So when I tell founders, because founders all the time push back about traction. They're like, the traction is so arbitrary. What does it mean? Like, give me some numbers, give me some benchmarks. And I can't, because when you're pitching to me, you're not just pitching against all the other companies in your industry, you're also pitching against all the other companies I'm gonna see over a given period of time. So if I tell you, hey, if you're doing 20,000 monthly recurring revenue, you're right where I want you to be. And you come back to me like, Mac, I did better. I'm at 35,000 monthly recurring revenue. Give me that check. And I'd be like, that's awesome. I saw a company last week doing 60,000 in monthly, right? So that doesn't mean I'm going to invest in that company over yours, but now it's a different, like now there's a lot of calculus that has to go into that, right? And so if I just give you a benchmark, that's really not being fair, because when you come back to me, you hit that benchmark, well, it might be a moving goalpost because somebody else along the way during this time period that I'm looking at you might actually be a more interesting opportunity, or it might just be growing faster. It doesn't mean you're a bad company. It doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean I wouldn't want to fund you. I can only write so many checks. So if I can only write one check and I got a company doing 100K a month, 60K a month, or 40K a month, I got to figure out where we land with that. Our average check size is 100 to 250, by the way. Somebody put that in the chat.
Oh man, that's rough. We see that all the time too. You touched on this a little bit, but what are the common reasons you would pass on a deal? So you went through.
So common reasons I'll pass on a deal is typically around if it's in the market that I'm not excited about or that's too crowded. Like sometimes founders hate to hear like you're in an oversaturated market, right? Like dating apps, travel, home rentals, or real estate, hair creams and hair oils. Founders hate it when you tell them that the market is oversaturated. But all it really means is really that the market is really fragmented. That there's a lot of companies doing something similar. It doesn't mean that your company can't be successful, right? Like you very well could have a company that goes on to be a 50, 60, $75 million company doing really well, and you're uber successful as an individual, right? But I'm looking to invest in companies that are going to get to $1 billion plus valuation, and more larger and bigger VCs are looking for companies that have the potential to get to a $10 billion valuation. And that's becoming the new unicorn, right? And so it's just really hard to get there when you have so many competitors that are eating up portions of the market space, right? So like deals like that are really tough. You have to really, really stand out or be growing really, really fast for me to be interested in the market like that. It's just being honest. Companies that are too early. Now, let's take a moment, right? Because I'm having a whole bunch of founders be like, Mac, you say you invest early. And I see all these other funds that say they invest early and invest as early as like a napkin, ideas on the back of a napkin. But then when I pitch to them, they tell me I'm too early. How is that possible when you say you invest in the back of a napkin? No. Hear me out. Yes. Do we invest pre-product or pre-revenue? We do. How often do we do that? It's really, really rare. And so when you see funds like ours and other funds that say this is what we do, it's not because that's actually what we do. It's because we're covering all of our exceptions, right? Every now and then you're going to meet a company or a founder that's an exception, and you'll do that deal. And so you put it on your marketing material so that those folks who fit the exception will talk to you. Because if you say you only talk to companies with traction, then you'll never get a chance to meet those exceptions, right? But if you look at most of our portfolios, the vast majority of companies we invest in do have traction or have some growth, because that is really our best proxy for your ability to execute. The earlier you are, the more it's like, these are hopes and dreams. I can't get returns off of hopes and dreams, right? I need you to show me what you can do. And what you can do is shown by what you're able to accomplish in traction. And yes, I understand. If you're a founder who doesn't have access to friends and family capital, it's a lot harder. You get to this chicken and the egg thing, right? And then we get to the conversation of like, well, Mac, you're telling me you want me to get traction, but I don't have these resources and so much harder for me. But even when I do work hard, and even when I do get some traction, how come some white guy from Stanford who's got nothing can raise 5 million and I'm barely over here trying to raise 250,000? Okay, let me just jump on this one right now. And I'm getting ahead of y'all on some of this, right? Because I know what's coming. Here's the thing with that. 9 times out of 10, when you see a company raise money pre-product or pre-revenue, it has zero to do with the business and everything to do with their network. They just happen to have people in their network who have the means to invest in them at that stage. Has nothing to do with their business, right? Now, when you come to me, I don't care if you're the white guy from Stanford or you other entrepreneur pitching me. At this stage, I'm funding neither one of you because neither one of you deserve to get my money yet, right? Because I am a professional investor and I'm going to have a different bar. And also, like, I'm not writing a friends and family check per se, right? Like I'm not your friend, I'm not your family. We write checks at that stage sometimes, but that's not who we are to you, right? And so understand that a large portion of fundraising at the earliest stages has way more to do with network than anything else. And so when you don't have that network, we're not comparing apples to apples. Now, if we talk about the businesses, just strictly as businesses, their business does not deserve to get funding as much as yours doesn't at this stage, right? And that's okay. Does it mean you're going to have to work harder? Yeah, because you don't get to have that subjectivity of having that network. So that means you can only raise money based on your business. And unfortunately, that is a higher bar because that is a bar based on execution, not based on who you know. It's a lot easier to raise money based on who you know. And when you don't have a network, well, now you got to be able to raise money based on what you can do. And that's the difference. So when you start looking at companies like that and getting upset, understand it's not because people think they have a better business. It's just because they know people who have money. That's the only difference. But if they didn't have that network, they'd be struggling just as hard as you. There are plenty of white guys from Stanford who would pitch me, and I'm like, yeah, this idea sucks. Like it happens, right? Like, don't worry.
Well, I mean, what you're speaking about also, I mean, I bet there are parallels to be drawn as a founder, but also as a VC. I mean, your network has so much to do with that whole process. But thank you for sharing these truths with us. I think we know them, but it's helpful to hear them. So tell me, share with us. So you have a great meeting with a potential investee, and what happens next? Like, what is the process by which you fund a company?
Yeah, so you typically have a meeting with me or a member of my team first. Mm-hmm. If we like you, we bring you to a team meeting. It's going to be at least myself and my partner, Jonathan, at a minimum. And if we still like it from there, we'll come back and we pretty much get to a yes or no after that. And if it's a yes, then we'll ask for access to your data room and we'll do some more light due diligence. And then from there, we'll send the docs or wire money.
Can you tell us, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but can you tell us what is the data room? Tell us a little more about what you're looking for.
We're looking for, you make sure all your formation docs are in there. If you've been around for a while, want to make sure your tax documents are in there. Anything you have to prove out how many customers or how much revenue you've gotten. So whether it be your P&Ls or whether it be screenshots from your Google Play and Apple App Store apps to show us your actual metrics and numbers, right? Or whatever data platform you are to collect like your daily, weekly, and monthly active users, right? If you have partnerships, we want to see those contracts in there, right? If you're a B2B company, you have contracts with customers, we want to see that in there. If you have partners that you're working with that are under NDAs, we want to see that stuff in there, right? Like we need to know like what we're getting into, right? What you can and can't do, what rights you've already signed away, because like sometimes founders sign away a bunch of rights and don't even realize it. We want to see your cap table, your capitalization table. We want to know who else is an investor in the company, right? How much ownership, and really for us at this stage is more us understanding how much ownership do you have. You know, sometimes we see founders with way too little ownership. And so now we got to strategize with you, like, how do we get that changed, right? How do we work it out so that you get some of your equity back, right? Things like that.
Do you also see now, with some founders, there is actually, it's a hot startup and there's plenty of VCs that want to get in. And it's becoming increasingly harder for VCs to find that spot, especially if you're a smaller VC. What makes RareBreed stand out? Like, why should a founder want RareBreed on their cap table?
Well, one, we tend to find founders before they get to that point, so we don't have that issue as much. The other thing is for founders that are in that space, because of my Twitter presence, they'll reach out to me directly and be like, hey, Mac, I'm raising I got a bunch of folks in. I don't really need the money, but I would just love to have you on our cap table. You seem like a great partner. The reason why I think people want us or should want us on their cap table is really this fundamental thing of once we've made the investment, I tell all my founders to treat me like an employee. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is, I can tell you I'm going to be value add and I'm going to help and all those other things, but I still have a day job, right? I'm looking at deals, I'm negotiating new deals, I'm all that kind of stuff. So out of sight, out of mind becomes a thing. Mm-hmm. So it's easiest for me to help you if you let me know when you need help. That means text me, call me, email me, whatever. When you need something done, let me know. Treat me like I'm an employee. Like I get texts from founders all the time, like, Mac, I just put out this week. Can you retweet it for me? Sure. Hey, Mac, I need an intro to this person. Do you know them? I don't, but I can ask my Twitter following and get you the intro, right? Like, let me know when you need help, and I will do any and everything I can to help you. Like, am I going to help you with follow-on funding? Sure. Am I going to help you try to get partnerships and customers? Sure. But can I help you set up, your payroll? Yeah, if you need that, right? Can I help you, think through strategically your go-to-market strategy? Yeah, let's set up an hour meeting. Let's go through it. Like treat me like an employee. And I think, that is a true value add for our founders.
What additional advice do you have for entrepreneurs that are navigating this process super early?
I mean, first and foremost, raising money is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Know that going in. And learn to get comfortable with the no's. Learn not to take the no's personal. Learn not to take the unresponsive email personal, right? It's a lot of busy people in this space. There's a lot of companies trying to raise money. And so just go in knowing this is going to be really hard. You're going to have to write the same email to the same person 10 times before they respond. And it has nothing to do with you. It is not a reflection of you as a person or a reflection of your business, right? It is a reflection of just fundamentals of time and space in a day. So just start there. Next, understand nobody owes you anything. Don't go into it thinking, I got a company, I'm doing well, you have to give me your money. No. Nobody has to do anything for you. Nobody has to care about you. Like, know that going in day one. But if you put in the work and you stay at it, the money will come. The more you grow, the more customers you get, the more signups you get, the more traction you get, the more work you put in, it'll come. And yes, it may take longer than you want. But just because it's taking longer than what you want doesn't mean that anybody deserves to change that for you. I'll tell you, for my first startup, it took us 3 years to figure out what we were doing. And it wasn't until the 3.5 years in, we started getting interest from investors. And at that point, we decided to sell the company because we didn't want to do it no more. This was enough, right? But literally, we spent the first 3 years asking everybody, why won't you invest in us? And then we said, forget it. We just going to focus on doing business. Let's get some contracts, some big contracts in. And the next thing you know, I do a deal with Viacom, then I do a deal with Disney, then I do a deal with American Express. And conversations have changed. Because fundamentally, remember what I am as an investor, right? One, I can only get paid if you do one of two things. You get acquired or go public. Like, generally speaking, those are the only two ways I get paid. That's a really high bar for any company. Most companies are never going to do either one of those. That's number one. Number two, I am nothing more than a glorified financial advisor, right? Some people go to Charles Schwab and give their money to somebody to manage it in public markets, and other people come to me to do it in private markets. That's my only job, is to take people's money and make them more money. Like, as much as I have an ethos of working with founders and supporting founders and loving founders and helping founders, I can speak to you, give you advice, and help you all day long. But my job is the people who gave me their money is to make them more money. And I'm always making the calculus on that. Because if I make an investment in you just because I like you, and it doesn't work out, well, most companies aren't going to work out. That's okay. But that's one less check I have to make to somebody else. That's one more last shot I have to impress the people who invested in me so I can make more investments in the future, right? Like that's the whole honest truth of it. So go in knowing like, yes, this may be hard and don't nobody owe you anything. But when you put in the work, things happen. And so I tell founders, don't focus on thinking about, I got to put this plan together and do this so I can raise money. No, you got to do everything you can to make the best business possible because that's the goal. The goal isn't to raise money. There are plenty of companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars and failed. Like, it's so easy to fail after raising $50 million or less. And it doesn't get any harder to fail after you raised $100 million. Like, raising money is not the goal. Like, you getting money from me is literally a tool. Like, when you raise money from an investor, it is just a tool so you can grow faster. It's just a tool for growth. It's not validation that you're going to be successful and win. Mm-hmm. That comes from the business itself. That comes from what you do day in, day out. Not for these few weeks or few months you're going through this process of raising capital. No, that comes from all the hard work you're going to do over the next 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 years. Focus on that part. If you do that well, everything else will come.
Yeah, I feel like we forget because we're so in this, and founders that are possibly spending so much time on Twitter, following investors, listening to other founders, that raising capital is not the goal, and maybe not every business is a venture scalable business. It could be a perfectly successful business without venture capital. So, what in your mind, what do you think is a litmus test for a founder to know whether or not their business can be fueled by venture capital?
Do you fundamentally believe, or are you in an industry that can support $1 billion business, right? It's got to be a market size large enough. So a multi-billion-dollar market. That's the first thing I evaluate with any company. Because you could have an amazing company growing super fast, but your market size is only like 700 million. And you're probably not going to get 100% of that market, right? And so like now that shrinks your valuation automatically, right? So you need to have a market size that can get to $1 billion. And then understand venture, understand the way a venture fund works, right? The average life of a venture fund is 10 years, right? And so that means I'll start investing money in years 1 through 5, and then years 6 through 10, I'm waiting for those companies I've invested in to start returning money back to us, right? So depending on where you are in the life cycle of the fund, so let's say I'm 2 years into my fund, I got 8 more years to go. That means when I invest in this company, I'm investing with the belief that I can see, like your company gives me a proxy if I can see a potential to you getting to somewhere between 50 million to 100 million in revenue in the next 7 to 8 years. Because if you can get me to 50 to 100 million in revenue, then 20x or 10x revenue gets us to $1 billion valuation. And that's really what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to see you get to $1 billion valuation in the next, call it 8 years. And like I said earlier, the new benchmark for a lot of these larger funds is a $10 billion exit, right? Which means now you need to be in a market that can support a $10 billion company. So like the market size needs to be 10 billion plus. And then do you have the ability to grow fast enough that in the next 7, 8, maybe 10, maybe 12 years, you can get to a point where you can earnestly be able to get a $10 billion or multi-billion dollar valuation. That's a really freaking high bar, right? And you have to really be honest with yourself and think about your business like, hey, if I grow this business right, and I do everything right, and I hire enough employees, and I get enough supplies, how do I get to a point where I'm doing 50 to 100 million plus in revenue, and let's call it the next 5 to 8 years? That's hard to model out for most businesses. This is why a lot of VCs like B2B SaaS companies,
Mhm.
right? Because if you're doing, so because B2B, you got larger, dollar amounts that you're making. And SaaS, you ain't got no supply. You ain't got to worry about supply chain, nothing. You just got AWS and go, right? But then your money's going to go to its engineers. I could do that all day, every day, right? You write one set of code and you do that in 500 companies. That's a really easy way to do the math. I think it puts investors in a position where they get over excited about stuff like that, because I don't think that's the only way to get there. But the reason they do that is because of the way this math works out. And so you as a founder need to be thinking the same way we as VCs do to kind of understand where you might fit in the landscape.
That's very helpful. I'm looking into the chat and I see there are a couple of questions here. So let's see this. What is your average check size?
100 to 250.
100 to 250K. And I see another one. Look at this. What do you suggest for those founders who are resource scarce, struggling to get pre-seed funding to establish the traction necessary to earn your audience?
So one of the things I tell founders all the time is, as innovative and unique as you're trying to be with your product, you need to put just as much time into be innovative and unique in your customer acquisition. Like, this was the issue I had with my first company. And I was a year and a half into building my first company, beautiful product, all this code in the background, 0 customers. And I was like, yo, without money, we can't pay for marketing to get customers. And then one of my advisors was like, look, I got my first 500 customers by cold tweeting people. And he went to Twitter and he started searching, because like our first product was a platform to let you crowdfund money for gifts. That's what it started out as. And he looked for people talking about their birthday. And he's like, start tweeting these people and telling them to use your platform. That's how we got our first 1,000 customers, right? For my second company, it was an e-commerce platform supporting folks who were selling on Instagram. So think about Instagram with a buy button before Instagram had a buy button, like 6 years before Instagram had a buy button. And so what we did was I started a page on Instagram. It's called Shop Redberry. It's still there, where I would just repost pictures of products from sellers I wanted to work with. And what happened was those sellers would always like or comment that picture, right? Because like I'm just giving them free advertisement. And so that gave me an initial touch point. And so I used that to start building a spreadsheet. The other thing was 30% of all the other likes and comments came from other sellers and bloggers. And I used all that information to build myself this spreadsheet over a few months. And then I started an email campaign going to the sellers I specifically wanted to work with. And I ended up signing up 120 sellers in 2 weeks, all willing to pay $20 a month pre-product. And I used that to then go raise $250,000. Now, neither one of those strategies cost me any money, but they both cost me a bunch of time. You usually either have one or two things. You either have time or money. And whichever one you have is the one you're going to use. And since I didn't have any money, all I did was use my time. I was on Instagram like 8-9 hours a day. I was on Twitter 5-6 hours every day, right? Like, it took up way too much of my time, but that's what I needed to do to get to my first customers. And that was the strategies that worked for me, right? There's a bunch of other strategies out there. You just have to take the time to be creative or start, listening to podcasts or reading books and reading blogs around customer acquisition and growth hacking. There's so many different growth hacking tools out there and growth hacking strategies. You just got to get really creative with it. And trust me, I understand it sucks. It's a lot harder. It'd be a lot easier to just have $1 million budget and put it on Google ads. Like, I get it. But when you don't have that, you got to figure it out.
I have another one here. And I'm very tempted to switch gears and ask you questions about your fundraising journey as a VC. But I'm going to do one more. Oh yeah, there's a question in here. What is the best way to build your network, and how to build your Twitter up? Because that was a major strategy for you while raising RareBreed Ventures, right?
during normal times, when we are having in-person events, you got to go to the events. You got to go to the meetups. You got to go to the conferences, because it's not about meeting an investor. It's about meeting somebody who can make you an introduction to an investor, right? Like the warm intros are a thing. Like, as terrible as it is in our industry, it's a very network driven industry, right? So understand, like, that is a thing. So how do you meet somebody who knows an investor? Is you have to put yourself in positions and in situations to allow serendipity to happen, right? Like, while I'm at this conference, I'm standing in line for the box lunches they give out. And it just so happens the person in front of me is another entrepreneur, and we strike up a conversation. Well, come to find out, this is an entrepreneur who ended up raising money from Andreessen Horowitz. And after getting to know them for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, they've now like, hey, would you like to meet some of my investors? Like, that's not what I was expecting. Or I'm at a local event, and I'm seeing things happening. And during the networking section, I saw somebody standing over to the side by themselves and struck up a conversation. It just so happened they happen to be a local angel investor who's now guided me about angel investors in the community, right? You weren't expecting that, but you put yourself in the position to allow serendipity to happen. To be more prescriptive, though, is to use your LinkedIn and start asking people you know to make connections to people you want to know, right? You take those second and third degree connections and try to find people who can get you those intros. And then it's also building up your presence as a thought leader, whether it be long form pieces with a blog, a newsletter, or Medium posts and things like that, which work really well on LinkedIn, or whether it's you putting out tweets, sharing information about your industry, giving out insights about things people don't know or don't understand about your industry. And granted, it can be difficult to do that, especially on Twitter. Like, the way Twitter works is just all about consistency. Like, once you start, you just gotta keep going. And that can be difficult, especially if it's not like core to your personality. And so what I would tell you to do is treat it as almost a work assignment. Have it on your work calendar, like, hey, I'm gonna tweet 3 times a day and I'm gonna put it on my calendar. Or I'm gonna do a newsletter every 2 weeks and now it's on my calendar. It's like a work assignment. Treat it as part of the job, because it actually is part of the job, whether you treat it like that or not, it is. So if it's something that's not something that's natural to you, well, doing work and having your calendar and all that other stuff, that is natural to you. So then, or incorporate it into what you already naturally do. And that'll help you get through some of those barriers. And if it's a long form piece, right, like a blog or a newsletter, be thoughtful, make sure you go over it, make sure you got friends to proofread it, edit it, all the other stuff. If it's Twitter, don't think about it. That's the key. Too many people want to put out the perfect tweet. Don't put out the perfect tweet. Just put out a tweet. Just tweet. That's all you got to do, right? Because the more you tweet, you're going to get more followers. And at some point, you're going to put out a tweet that's going to do really well. And there's no way to tell. Like, there are certain types of things you can do to try and make a tweet that's going to be, better, well received, but there's no guarantee on that. I tell you, there are tweets I put out that's just a throwaway. It was just something I wanted to get off my head and do really well. And there are other tweets I get crafted and like, oh, I'm gonna hit them with this and it's going to be like a really great, insightful tweet. And like 20 people like it, right? Like, just tweet. Don't think about it. Don't overthink about it, because all thinking about and overthinking about it's going to do is slow you down and make you not tweet. Just put it together and put it out. The more you do it, the easier it gets. So, yeah.
Wow, that was very, very helpful. Razi, I hope this answered your question, because you have a question here in the chat that says, how should we get our extroversion on if you're an introvert, science nerd? I think you answered it really well. Treat it part of the job. It doesn't need to be part of your personality. It doesn't need to be part of who you are. But if it's part of the job, put those reminders on, get those 3 tweets out, whatever it is that makes sense for your business. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. If there's any more questions, please drop them in the chat. I will ask you something that I've been meaning to ask you since we started, which is, tell us about your favorite, if that's possible, any of your favorite investments or founders. Why are they special? and what makes it, what makes it a special investment for you?
So this is unfair. Because like all of our companies are like our children. It's like asking me who's your favorite kid. Like that's not fair.
So it's a tough question.
It's a tough question, but I'll say this. Investments that are really meaningful to me. One is Deveneering Labs. That was the woman who became a surrogate mother. To be her first investor is one of the greatest things I've ever done. Another one's in the company called Path. Used to be called Scholar.me. The founder, when I met him, was a 16-year-old kid in high school. Made the investment when he was 17, basically gave him money to drop out of college, right? He goes on to raise money from a bunch of ex-Goldman Sachs folks. He raised money for YC. He got a $100K check personally from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, and he's now getting ready to raise a really large Series A. He's a 21-year-old Black kid from Baltimore who doesn't start that company if I don't give him his first $40K check when I was still working for the state of Maryland. He's actually what I believe to be the first Black founder to ever get a personal check from Paul Graham, the founder of YC, right? Like that investment means something to me. And he's at a point now where he's in stratospheres and knows people and talks to people far more impressive than me. So like, we don't talk about investment stuff anymore. I'm more like, it's like a big brother kind of a thing. But that one matters to me. And the last one is a company called, I won't put out the company name because it's being recorded, but it's an investment that means a lot to me because it's an incredible founder. And when we were doing the investment, the lead investor during the investment found out this founder was pregnant. And when they found out the founder was pregnant, they got really mad. And they felt like she was withholding information and lying to them. And so because of that, they came back to the table and tried to renegotiate her valuation and push it down, which is the reason why she wasn't telling anybody she was pregnant to begin with, right?
You wonder.
And I took the personal stance of calling that fund and telling them that they would not be investing in that company. I literally kicked the lead out of the deal because I didn't feel like they were acting in good faith. And I didn't want somebody like that to be on that founder's cap table. I later found her other investors to replace that lead and got her more money that she was originally looking for. So worked out. But that one matters a lot to me because that was a really unfortunate situation that I had no right speaking up the way I did, but I felt like I had to because the founder was in the position where she felt like she needed to take these people's money and put them on her board, and I wouldn't let her. And hopefully her company is better off for it.
Thank you for sharing that. I hope that there are more investors out there that live by their values and, feel empowered to share these experiences because I think it's really important. And thank you for doing that today.
Absolutely.
I see a couple of questions here. Okay, this is from Jake. What's your framework for crafting a cold email to thought leaders?
Be informative and be able to go really deep on a subject while also making sure you're developing storytelling skills to make that deep knowledge digestible and human, right? So if you're going to go let's take Web3. You're going to go really deep on DAOs. You're going to explain to people what decentralized organizations are and how they work, and then give an example of your company or other companies properly using DAOs and why it's so important to you. So you go from the really informational heavy stuff to also incorporating this is a human element to it so that it's easier to resonate with folks.
And this was actually one of my questions too. You say in your investment thesis that you want to invest in companies outside of the three big hubs, tech hubs in the country. So what are your favorite places outside of them that you've noticed?
Favorite? I mean, we've literally invested like all over. Toronto. Well, we got two companies in Toronto, Portland, a company in Memphis, Dallas, Texas, three companies in Maryland, Orlando, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Ohio. Like I
Okay,
like to look all over the place.
yeah, I think the answer is there's companies everywhere.
There's companies
You
everywhere.
just need to look.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, well, we have like a couple of minutes left, so I have one last question for you. Being a fund manager is not an easy job, clearly, but what motivates you to do this?
These amazing founders, right? Like the three companies I mentioned earlier that are important to me. I know their stories are different if I'm not here. And like, that's why I do this, right? That young man who's building this incredible company, he did something amazing at some point in his life. But I don't know if he gets to build this company, which is truly his dream, his life's work, if I don't give him that first 40K. The founder building the wig dryer, I don't know if she gets to build her company if I don't help her through those first 3 years of getting no's and even telling her it's possible, let alone writing her first check. Or that founder with the other company where, she had a toxic investor that was about to invest in her company. And it's an investor who says they invest in underrepresented founders and very specifically in women. Like, I don't know what her situation is like if I'm not one of the investors at the table helping, guide founders sometimes. And so for me, it's the impact I can make and the amazing founders I get to support. This job is bigger than me. And that's why I love what I do.
Thank you so much, Mac. Thank you so much for the time, for this incredible discussion. And for everyone here, go follow Mac on Twitter. He's dropped his handle in the chat. And if you're familiar with our events, I want to take this opportunity to say we have our next event coming up on April 21st. It's our Founder Day. Join us to learn how to grow your visibility for your startup and ACPR game there. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mac.
Thank you.